Right now, over 50,000 cargo ships are crossing the world's oceans. Most are unarmed, slow, vulnerable, and in certain waters, they're being watched. In 2024, Houthi militants in Yemen began targeting commercial vessels in the Red Sea with drones and missiles. Global shipping companies had to make a choice: arm their ships, avoid the region entirely, or accept the risk. But this isn't the first time merchant vessels became targets. 15 years ago, off the coast of Somalia, a group of pirates made a fatal miscalculation. They saw what looked like an easy target, a slow-moving container ship, alone in dangerous waters. What they didn't know was that this ship had a captain who wouldn't surrender, a crew ready to fight back, and within hours, the full might of the United States Navy would descend on their position. This is the story of the Maersk Alabama, the hijacking that shocked the world, and the moment when modern piracy met modern warfare. Let's set the scene. April 2009, the waters off the coast of Somalia. For years, this region had become the most dangerous shipping lane on Earth. Somali pirates armed with AK-47s and RPGs were launching hundreds of attacks every year. They'd hijack ships, hold crews hostage, and demand millions in ransom. And it worked. Shipping companies paid. Insurers paid. Between 2005 and 2012, Somali pirates collected an estimated $400 million in ransom payments. Why Somalia? The country had collapsed into civil war. There was no functional government, no coast guard, no law enforcement. Fishing villages turned to piracy out of desperation, or opportunity, depending on who you asked. The pirates operated in small teams, using fast skiffs launched from motherships. They'd approach cargo vessels at high speed, scale the sides using ladders and grappling hooks, and storm the bridge before the crew could react. Most ships complied. They had no weapons, no training, and no way to defend themselves. The international maritime law was clear. Merchant vessels were civilian, not military. They weren't supposed to fight. But Captain Richard Phillips didn't see it that way. Phillips was a 53-year-old merchant marine from Vermont. He'd been sailing for over 30 years. He knew the risks of transiting near Somalia, but the Maersk Alabama had a job to do: deliver 17,000 metric tons of cargo, including food aid destined for Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda.
On April 8, 2009, the Maersk Alabama was 240 miles off the Somali coast. Phillips had the crew running anti-piracy drills. They locked the bridge doors, disabled the outside ladders, rigged fire hoses to repel boarders, but it wouldn't be enough. At 7 a.m., the radar picked up two skiffs approaching at high speed. Phillips immediately sounded the alarm. The crew locked themselves in secured areas. The ship went to full speed, but a fully loaded container ship can only do about 18 knots. The pirate skiffs were doing 25. One skiff broke off, engine trouble, but the second kept coming. 4 Somali pirates, armed with AK-47s, closed the distance. They fired warning shots. Phillips ordered evasive maneuvers, but there's only so much you can do with a 500-foot cargo ship. At 7:30 a.m., the pirates reached the ship. They used a ladder and ropes to climb the hull. Within minutes, they were on deck, firing into the air, screaming commands. Phillips met them on the bridge. He was now a hostage. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The chief engineer, Mike Perry, was below decks with most of the crew. They'd locked themselves in the engine room, a fortified space deep in the ship's hull. The pirates needed the crew to operate the ship, but the crew had disabled the controls. The Maersk Alabama was dead in the water, and the pirates were trapped on a ship they couldn't move. Perry and his team made a bold decision. They would retake the ship. Using their knowledge of the vessel's layout, they moved through the dark, sweltering corridors. They ambushed one of the pirates, a man named Abduli Moose, the leader, and captured him. they had leverage. Meanwhile, Phillips was negotiating with the remaining 3 pirates on the bridge. He offered them a deal. Take the ship's lifeboat, take $30,000 from the ship's safe, and leave. In exchange, they'd get their leader back. The pirates agreed, but they wanted one more thing. They wanted Captain Phillips to come with them. At this point, Phillips made a decision that still divides opinion. Some say he volunteered to protect his crew. Others say he was forced. Either way, Phillips stepped into the lifeboat with 4 armed pirates, and they drifted away from the Maersk Alabama. The crew was safe. The ship was secure. But now Richard Phillips was alone with his captors in an 18-foot enclosed lifeboat 300 miles from the Somali coast.
And the U.S. Navy was about to get involved. The USS Bainbridge, a guided missile destroyer, was already en route. The Navy had been tracking the situation from the moment the hijacking began. Within 24 hours, the Bainbridge arrived on scene. Now, it was a standoff. 4 pirates, 1 hostage, and a U.S. warship with enough firepower to level a city. The pirates demanded safe passage to Somalia and a ransom. The Navy refused. Negotiations dragged on for days. The lifeboat drifted in the open ocean, baking under the sun. Tensions inside were escalating. Phillips later described the conditions. No food, little water. The heat was unbearable. The pirates were increasingly erratic, arguing among themselves, threatening him. On April 10th, Phillips attempted to escape. He jumped overboard and started swimming toward the Bainbridge. The pirates opened fire, dragged him back, and beat him. The situation was deteriorating fast. Then, on April 12th, Navy SEAL Team 6 arrived. They'd parachuted into the ocean and boarded the Bainbridge under cover of darkness. Their mission was clear: rescue Phillips, neutralize the pirates. But there was a problem. The lifeboat was enclosed, with small windows. The SEALs couldn't see inside clearly, and any rescue attempt risked Phillips being killed in the crossfire. The Bainbridge began towing the lifeboat, ostensibly to bring it closer to calmer waters. In reality, this gave the SEAL snipers a stable shooting platform. As night fell on April 12th, the situation reached a breaking point. One of the pirates was on the Bainbridge negotiating, leaving 3 in the lifeboat with Phillips. The SEALs had clear lines of sight through the windows. And then, one of the pirates pointed an AK-47 directly at Phillips. The SEAL commander gave the order. 3 snipers, 3 targets, 1 shot each. Simultaneous kills. In less than a second, all 3 pirates were dead. Phillips was pulled to safety, shaken but alive. The 4th pirate, Abduwali Muse, was already in custody aboard the Bainbridge. The standoff was over. Richard Phillips returned home to a hero's welcome. His story became a best-selling book and a Hollywood film. But the man himself remained deeply affected by the ordeal. In interviews, he spoke about the nightmares, the PTSD, the difficulty of returning to normal life. Abduwali Muse was tried in U.S. federal court. He claimed he was only 16 years old, though prosecutors disputed this. He was convicted and sentenced to nearly 34 years in federal prison. As of 2025, he's still incarcerated. But the larger question remained: what happens now? The Maersk Alabama incident was a turning point in how the world dealt with maritime piracy. Before 2009, piracy was treated as a law enforcement issue, something to be negotiated, not fought. After the Alabama, everything changed. Armed security teams became standard on ships transiting high-risk areas. Private military contractors, many of them former Navy SEALs or British Royal Marines, were hired to ride along and protect vessels. Ships installed razor wire, reinforced doors, and safe rooms, citadels, where crews could lock themselves in during an attack. Naval patrols increased. The US, EU, and other nations established permanent anti-piracy task forces in the region. Warships began escorting convoys through the Gulf of Aden. And it worked. By 2013, Somali piracy had dropped by over 90%. The last major hijacking was in 2017. The golden age of Somali piracy was over. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The problem wasn't solved. It was just suppressed. Somalia is still a failed state. The conditions that created piracy, poverty, lack of governance, overfishing by foreign trawlers, those haven't changed. The pirates didn't disappear. They went dormant. And some shifted to other criminal enterprises, like kidnapping and armed robbery on land. Meanwhile, piracy has migrated. The Gulf of Guinea, off the coast of West Africa, is now the most dangerous region for maritime piracy. Attacks there are more violent, more organized, and harder to stop. The lesson? You can't solve piracy with warships alone. You need political stability, economic development, and international cooperation. But in 2009, none of that mattered. What mattered was a captain who refused to let his crew be taken, a team of engineers who fought back from the engine room, and 3 Navy SEAL snipers who made impossible shots from a moving ship in the dark. Let's return to where we started. The pirates saw a freighter. They thought it was just another payday, another unarmed, defenseless cargo ship they could take without consequence. They were wrong. The Maersk Alabama wasn't a warship. It didn't have naval guns or missile systems, but it had something the pirates didn't count on: people who refused to be victims. And when those people were threatened, the full force of the United States military responded. 3 shots, 3 kills, 1 rescue. It's easy to see this as a simple story of good versus evil. And on one level, it is. Phillips and his crew were innocent. The pirates were criminals. The SEALs were heroes. But it's also more complicated than that. The Somali pirates weren't cartoon villains. They were products of a collapsed society, desperate men who turned to crime because they had no other options. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it explains it. The real tragedy is that 15 years later, the root causes haven't been addressed. And now, new threats are emerging. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, increased aggression from state-sponsored groups. The lines between piracy, terrorism, and asymmetric warfare are blurring. So what's the lesson? Maybe it's this. In the 21st century, there are no safe spaces. The oceans are vast, but they're not lawless. Threaten commerce, threaten lives, and eventually you'll face consequences. The pirates thought they were hunting a freighter. Instead, they found a floating fortress, not because of the ship itself, but because of the people on it, and the nation willing to protect them. Richard Phillips went back to sea. He kept sailing, not because he had to, but because he refused to let fear win. That's the real story. Not the guns, not the SEALs, not even the rescue. It's the refusal to surrender. The pirates saw a freighter, but they found something far more dangerous. They found Americans who fight back.